Hello and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I'm one of the ministers here. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and by the worship team of Linda Warren, Heather Thorpe, Stephen Gregorius, Daniel Carnes. And our special musical guest today is percussionist Todd Hammis. The vision of First Unitarian Society is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our Unitarian Universalist values in our lives, our community, and our world. For those connecting with us virtually today, we are glad you are with us, and we hope you will be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour immediately following the service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, as well as on the slide that will be seen again after today's postlude. Our announcement slides will also be shown briefly after the service, and we encourage you to take a moment and learn about our upcoming programs and activities. If you are visiting us today, welcome. We are so very glad that you are with us. If you'd like more information about First Unitarian Society, please stop by the welcome table outside the auditorium here in the Commons after the service. And now, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. To worship means to consider that which has worth. Today we consider with gratitude the many gifts of this community.
The opportunity to be affirmed in who we are and to offer that affirmation to others. The chance to stand up together to help remake the world in the ideal of justice. The freedom to choose one's own path to truth and to learn from the travelogues of others.
The space to expand one's own spirit and to reconnect after busy or troubling weeks with the sustaining truths of one's life. Regular reminders that we must see our world through the lens of love, and the aspiration to consider all life as precious, for if all of it is made of stardust, how can it not be wondrous?
So let us welcome all of these gifts with gratitude, for they have been paid for with many currencies.
The sweat of those who persisted in justice's name against hostility and adversity. The tears of those who struggled to build better lives for those in this life. The questions of our children as they understand the world anew and offer their understandings to us as a fresh lens.
The laughter and joy of those giddy with the embrace of community. The dollars and cents of those who gave what they could, and then stretched a little more. The infinite small acts of service that make the parts greater than the whole, done by those who knew themselves in sympathy with our purposes.
So today we consider with gratitude and humility what it means to make promises to one another and what has been promised to us. And now, with all of this, let us enter into worship with gladness in our hearts. And I invite you to rise in all the ways that we do as we join together in reading our affirmation as we light our chalice. We light our flaming chalice each week with a simple spark to make holy our time together. With this flame, may our highest intentions be refreshed. With this flame, may we remember who we are and whose we are. With this flame, may our faith be renewed and reignited to guide our journey.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. Please join me in singing hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit in heaven, like the first dew falls on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's all play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Please be seated. There's an old Hindu story. In it, there's a boy who wants a drum, but his mother can't afford a drum, so sadly, she gives him a stick. Though he doesn't know what to do with it, he shuffles home and begins to play with the stick. And just then, he encounters an old woman trying to light her wood stove.
The boy freely gives her his stick. She lights her fire, makes some bread, and in return she gives him half a loaf. Walking on, the boy comes upon a potter's wife whose child is crying from hunger. The boy freely gives her the bread. In gratitude, she gives him a pot.
Though he doesn't know what to do with it, he carries it along the river, where he sees a washerman and his wife quarreling because the wife broke their one pot. The boy gives them the pot, and in return, they give him a coat.
Since the boy isn't cold, he carries the coat until he comes to a bridge where a man is shivering. Riding to town on a horse, the man was attacked and robbed of everything but his horse. The boy freely gives him the coat. Humbled, the man gives him his horse.
Not knowing how to ride, the boy walks the horse into town where he meets a wedding party with musicians. The bridegroom and his family are all sitting under a tree with long faces. According to custom, the bridegroom is to enter the procession on a horse, which hasn't shown up. The boy freely gives him the horse.
Relieved, the bridegroom asks what he can do for the boy. Seeing the drummer surrounded by all his drums, the boy asks for the smallest drum, which the musician gladly gives him.
This story reminds us that the unexpected gifts that come our way may not be for us. It may be that, like that boy, we are called to carry it to another. We might be but one exchange along the way, and one exchange from realizing how truly connected we are.
Now, into a time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering which sustains our community here and also supports the work of our outreach offering recipient. And this week, that recipient is the Sierra Club, the Four Lakes group, the Madison area's expression of what many would call the nation's oldest, largest, and most influential grassroots environmental organization. The Sierra Club works to protect our communities and the planet. Please give generously. You will see on your screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You can also use the text to give information there as well. There are baskets here in the hall and just outside the doors if you wish to deposit cash in person. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
The poet Seamus Heaney wrote these words titled Follower. My father worked with a horse plow. His shoulders globed like a full sail strung between the shafts and the furrow. The horses strained at his clicking tongue. An expert, he would set the wing and fit the bright steel-pointed sock. The sod rolled over without breaking at the headrig with a single pluck of reins. The sweating team turned round and back into the land. His eye narrowed and angled at the ground, mapping the furrow exactly. I stumbled in his hobnailed wake, fell sometimes on the polished sod. Sometimes he rode me on his back, dipping and rising to his plod. I wanted to grow up and plow, to close one eye, stiffen my arm. All I ever did was follow in his broad shadow round the farm. I was a nuisance, tripping, falling, yapping always. but today it is my Father who keeps stumbling behind me and will not go away. This image of a young boy following behind his father, seeing him as unimaginably strong and infinitely knowledgeable, unable to believe that he too someday could be as strong and knowing as him. This image came to me this week as I listened to two dear friends discuss their fathers. One recently lost her father after being his primary caregiver for the last few years, and one is walking her father in his 90s now through days of tests, appointments, and a growing list of unknowns. When does it happen? I wondered. When will it happen? When those roles reverse and these people we looked up to more than anyone else are the ones stumbling and looking up to us. When we are born, if we are fortunate and blessed, we find ourselves surrounded by loving, caring adults. People who make promises to care for us, to teach us, to protect us as best they can. These promises made between parent and child, they have a cycle. And one day it becomes the child's turn to return the love and care they have received, to fulfill the promises they have made. As you welcomed me into this world, I will be with you and care for you as you leave it. This is not the only place in our lives where we make promises, for we make them all the time, with our partners and our friends, with our coworkers and community members, with one another here in this community. The Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams believed that making promises was simply the human thing to do. In From Cage to Covenant, he wrote, "Human beings, individually and collectively, become human by making commitments, by making promises. The human being as such, as Martin Buber said, is the promise-making, promise-keeping, promise-breaking, promise-renewing creature. The human being is the promise maker, the commitment maker. Binding ourselves together through our promises and the covenants we make with one another, rather than in obedience to religious dogma, is one of the most distinguishing features of our Unitarian Universalist faith."
We often speak of our tradition as a covenantal faith, shaped and defined by the covenants that we forge with each other, within each congregation and between each of our congregations. Covenant is a biblical term. More on that in a moment. But first, let me get real with you. Covenant is ultimately a fancy theologian's term for promise. It is a particular sort of promise, one strong enough and important enough to endure beyond its breaking point. In some ways, a covenant might be easier to describe by what it is not. It is not, for instance, what Mary Poppins called a pie crust promise, easily made, easily broken. The promise held in a covenant is the sort that lingers, waiting for us to return to it even if we cast it aside or walk away. It is also not reducible to the level of a contract, an agreement in which if one party breaks the terms, the whole document is void, but for whatever penalty they might incur. No, a covenant is what happens when two people or more make a promise powerful enough to have a memory of its own, almost as if that promise was an unseen person itself, holding fast to their hands whatever else might come. The Hebrew Bible speaks at several points about covenants between the divine and a number of individuals and groups. At the end of the story of the world-destroying flood in Genesis, the character of God in that story, makes a covenant with all living things that flood will never again destroy the earth. The rainbow, the sign in the sky after a storm, is said in that story to be the physical manifestation of that covenant. Later, in the same book, the patriarch Abraham makes an animal sacrifice, a very common religious practice in his place and time. This required not only killing the animals to be sacrificed, but also cutting them apart. After he had done this, Abraham had a mystical vision in which the divine voice promised a future to his descendants, both their slavery and their deliverance from it. And he saw a fiery light like a torch pass between the pieces of the sacrifice. This image may be a little strange or unpleasant to some contemporary sensibilities, your vegan ministers included. But I see in this story a symbol of the power of covenant to connect things, even things that seem impossibly separate. Now, the Hebrew Bible is hardly the only religious source that speaks to the power of heartfelt promises, of course. In his quest for enlightenment, it is said that the prince Siddhartha left his palace behind and went to live poor and alone as an ascetic. He eventually came to sit under a certain tree, and while in contemplation there, he made a solemn promise to himself that he would find what he sought, a way to end suffering for himself and for all others, and that even if his flesh should fail and his body should falter, he would not leave his place until he had fulfilled that vow. And this is the story of how the one most commonly called the Buddha came to be enlightened. The tree under which he sat, the Bodhi tree, became a shrine even in the Buddha's own lifetime, we are told. A shrine exists on that same spot, even today. Every time that the tree at its center has died or sometimes been cut down in conflict, a new one has always been planted so that the memory of the place endures. One of the great gifts of spiritual community is that we are constantly teaching to and learning from each other. So I am grateful that some weeks ago, in one of our Zoom coffee hours, a couple of you introduced me to a poem by Robert W. Service called The Cremation of Sam McGee. Certainly not scripture by any conventional definition, but a story about the power of promise, nonetheless. It tells the tale of an unnamed narrator and his fellow prospector, Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way, I'd sooner live in hell. The cold finally catches up with Sam, and before he meets his end, he asks his friend to promise to cremate his remains so that he'll get to be warm one last time after he dies. And so the narrator slogs a long, hard way through the Yukon wilderness, more and more tired, feeling resentful of that extra weight of his deceased friend, but determined to fulfill his promise. Eventually, he comes to a frozen lake where he finds a derelict ship trapped in the ice. Realizing that this is his chance to do as he said he would and obey the covenant made with his friend, The miner lights the ship's boiler, stokes it with coal and wood, and puts Sam's body in to be cremated. He leaves for a while to let the fire do its work. The process is frightful to him, as I can well understand. But when he returns to collect Sam's ashen remains, he finds something unexpected behind the boiler door. And there sits Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, "Please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm." The poem is good for a laugh, and I recommend the whole thing to you. But it is also a testament, I think, to how important it is that we keep our promises.
This thinking around promises and what they mean, why we make them, it brought back the memory of participating in a week-long intensive workshop with the teacher Joanna Macy. Toward the end of the week, after 5 long days focused on the plight of our planet and our species, contemplating how we could live from a place of active hope, what consequences our own choices and our actions have at this point in human history, Joanna explained that the following morning she would ask us to take vows. She explained, after seeing perplexed faces staring back at her like this: how we think about the value of what we do is crucial. If we do not see our role as important, if we don't value the promises we make to others and to our shared humanity, then they won't have much impact on our choices, our decisions, our acts of daily living. We must each choose to give significance to the promises we make. There are things I have learned, she continued, that help us to do this. Years ago, on the last afternoon of a 2-week intensive workshop, I was out walking, and I met a young monk from the retreat center. "Well," he said, "I expect now on your last day, you'll be giving your people their vows." I told him it wasn't something I did or had ever put into a workshop. He said, "What a pity. I find in my own life vows to be so very helpful because they channel my energy to do what I really want to do." Continuing on her walk, Joanna looked at her hand and thought, if we were to have vows, they need not number more than the fingers and thumb of one hand. And immediately these 5 came to her. "I vow to myself and each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future beings, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support each other in our work for the world and to ask for help when needed, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows." After Joanna explained the story and told us the vows we could take the following morning, everyone was enthusiastic and willing. With the workshop ending and participants returning to their lives around the country far and wide, making these promises to ourselves and to each other deepened our sense of being linked in community. These promises offered us an anchor point, reminding us again and again of what we hold dear, what matters enough that we will commit our time and energy to it, what we are willing to make the center and core of our days. When we make promises such as this, or when promises are made between parents and their children, we are not negotiating contracts to achieve our mutual interest. We're building connections of love and trust that help realize a deeper hope in both our lives. In her book, An American Childhood, Annie Dillard compares the work of writing a book to raising a child, and she could just as easily be talking about the place we move from in shaping our covenants with one another. Willpower has very little to do with it, she says. If you have a baby crying in the middle of the night, and if you depend only on willpower to get you out of bed to feed the baby, that baby is going to starve. You do it out of love. There's nothing freakish about it. Caring passionately about something isn't against nature, and it isn't against human nature. It's what we are here to do. When we make promises with each other, it is not out of mutual self-interest. We don't make promises wondering what we will get in return. We do it because it's what we are here to do. And because it gives us the opportunity to tap a well in our hearts that is wider and deeper than we can know, but that many of us learn to keep sheltered and hidden. We might imagine that the promises we make limit us, but in fact, the opposite is true. The promises we make release the latches that make the love that we shelter away available. The testing and trusting we do with each other takes our commitment to a greater depth and opens previously unimagined possibilities. Of course, some of the promises we make are not kept or turn out to have been ill-advised. So we take a step back and we look for ways to reconnect. As a community, we offer consolation, care, space for healing and renewal. In the end, we remember that while we may have been wounded, the heart is a muscle that is best strengthened by being used.
On the morning of December 6th, 1917, a Norwegian ship carrying relief supplies and a French vessel carrying high explosives, both bound for the war in Europe, collided in Halifax Harbor. The result was the most powerful explosion ever caused by human action or human error in history up to that point. The city was decimated. Its waterfront was flattened, and the injuries and loss of life were enormous. Aid began to pour in immediately, money and supplies, but also people to help heal the wounded and bury the dead, to help the city rebuild. Boston, Massachusetts was just one of the many sources of this support. Another great port on the Northwest Atlantic, there was a natural sympathy with Halifax. The next year, the people of Nova Scotia sent an enormous evergreen tree to Boston for Christmas as thanks. In the early 1970s, that one-time event was restored as a standing practice. It continues still. Each year, from somewhere in the province of Nova Scotia, a tree between 40 and 50 feet in height is donated and makes a trip down the coast, where it is received and installed with reverent ceremony, a physical expression of gratitude, a tangible reservoir of memory binding two communities together. Somewhere within the sound of my voice, there may be someone who already knows this story well. And perhaps you might wish to point out that this practice was first renewed by the Lunenburg County Christmas Tree Producers Association in order to increase visibility of the Christmas tree export market and try to drum up more sales. But I would point out that they only managed to stay interested in that for a few years before the people took responsibility for the practice themselves through their elected government. Self-interest will only get you so far. And as Annie Dillard observed, force of will alone may carry you through one hard night or a few, but never enough. Only love can do that. Now is the season in our annual life together as a congregation when we each are called to reflect on the covenant that binds us together, the promises we have made to each other and to this community entrusted to us to share. We fulfill these promises and sustain this congregation in many different ways, with sweat, with ingenuity, with an enormous amount of energy and patience and time. Today and in the coming weeks, we are considering especially the material resources needed to allow this beloved institution to flourish and grow. The money that we will pledge, that we will promise, is just one token of what binds us together, but it is a token, a tangible reservoir of memory, a sign of a vow to channel our energy into what we really want to do. If you do not relish this time in our worship, if you find it a nuisance, as Seamus Heaney's father must have sometimes felt, as his son followed along behind him as he plowed, I trust that you're not alone. But just like the child at the start of that poem and the elder at the end of it, the question of what the First Unitarian Society means to you and how much of yourself you can give to that meaning persists in following behind each of us out of admiration and love.
Oh my, thank you. Hello to all of you here and those of you watching at home. I'm Janet Swanson, your Director of Membership and Adult Programs here at FUS. And I'm here today together with Cheryl Mellentine, our Stewardship Coordinator. We're here to say hello as we begin this Weekend of Promise. The Weekend of Promise is the start of our month of giving, a time when we give thanks for all we have and renew our commitment to our future. Membership and stewardship are points on the same journey to becoming part of this beloved community. As you travel on your membership journey within our congregation, you'll be encouraged and supported to find the best ways for you to connect with and take part in the life of this large and lovely congregation. FUS is a living entity held together by your participation, your commitment, your passion, and your love. It's all those things that support the work we do within our walls and as we join in the work of the larger community outside our doors.
Hello. I'm celebrating my 4th Weekend of Promise at FUS. And this year, it feels like we are lifting up our stewardship campaign with a renewed sense of possibility. Yes, we may say this every year, but somehow it feels dramatically different today. The heart of this campaign is you and your stories, which may be a moment, a journey, a new friendship, a revised sense of hope. All are what illuminate this life we share. It is the sharing of and listening to your stories that connect us as a thriving community. Throughout our month of giving, you will hear, see, and read stories from our members. We thank you for the generous gift of personal messages.
Also, this month, we invite you to spend some time discerning what this faith community means to you and how being a part of it affects your life. The invitation is to engage essential questions, to tell your story, and to learn from the stories of others. Allow your life to be a teacher. Connect with what it is that you love about our community, then deeply listen to one another. Learn from others why FUS is important to them. How does being a part of this faith community enrich our lives and help us to live more closely to and with alignment with our values? How do we share in bringing the light and life of Unitarian Universalism to the work of the world?
Leading up to our Weekend of Promise, there has been an intentional focus on engagement from all our program areas, with families at the center whenever possible. From hospitality to our planned events to making music to justice work, you have volunteered, you've participated, you've supported others, and you've made things possible. All great examples of UU stewardship in practice.
We know that an engaged community brings us new friendships and a sense of belonging. Engagement also brings new experiences and opportunities for families, the sharing of skills, the gain of wisdom, joy, and connection.
Our model of stewardship, giving of our time, talent, and financial support for our community, builds on our understanding that giving is an extension of our Unitarian Universalist values. We ask you to consider your gifts and what you bring to this community. Every gift is perfect. All gifts are honored. It was through the generous giving of our FUS members that we met our engagement goals for this year. FUS members provided sponsorships for all our events, which meant more families could fully take part. Thank you so much.
It's through collaboration that we do our best work, building on a joyous partnership between staff and members, with our UU values as our guideposts. As you know, we're your guides in membership and stewardship. You can find us with our clipboards in the commons and at outdoor hospitality. We're eager to listen to your stories and answer your questions. We are on this journey with all of you and hope to model in our staff partnerships a way to engage, support, and create our beloved community.
We look to one another for understanding and compassion. We know we hold each other close at heart, even when we're not together physically. To do this is to believe in and see the collective love of this faith community.
May we bless each other with gratitude and joyful connection as we share our joys and sorrows, celebrations and disappointments. Remember, it's with intention that love, wisdom, and creativity bring forth a beloved community. Join us as we lean on our stories for renewal.
Thank you, Janet and Cheryl. Each week we bring ourselves to this time and space, carrying with us all the concerns and joys of recent days. We share these here in a spirit of acceptance and support, knowing they are held in love. We light a candle for Carol Ferguson, who is recovering from a recent hospitalization. We send her our strength and our hopes for healing. We share Carol's deep gratitude for her daughter, Stacy and Bronwyn, who are helping care for her as she recovers. And we light a candle for Barb Volker and Mary Hampton, as Barb has entered hospice and is spending her last days here in this life. We are holding both of them close and surrounding them with much love and gratitude for the absolute blessing it has been to be able to know and love Barb all these many years. If you'll join me now in a moment of prayer with these words from Elizabeth Buki. Spirit of life, love which holds us, we gather in reverence and thanks for you. We are grateful for the gift of another breath and for each moment of connection, beauty, and truth. Cry with us in our pain for our world. Remind us that we are loved just as we are. Remind us that we are connected with all that is. Remind us that we do not journey alone. Give us what we need for today. Call us back to our promises, commitments, and values. Help us love ourselves and each other, and to show that love in our actions. Make us instruments of justice, equity, and compassion. Free us from all that harms. We declare that life and love are stronger than tyranny and fear, that a world of beauty and love is coming, and we must shape it together. May it be so. Amen.
There is a love holding all. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing hymn number 298, Wake Now My Senses. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation. conscience with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Now my vision of ministry clear, brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
No matter how weak or how frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in this world. So in the coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day act so you and we may be a little more whole. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for the postlude.
In the morning when you rise, I bless the sun, I bless the skies. I bless your lips, I bless your eyes. My blessing goes with you. In the nighttime when you sleep, oh, I bless you while I watch, I keep. As you lie in slumber deep, my blessing goes with you. This is my prayer for you, there for you, ever true. Each, every day for you, in everything you do. And when you come to me and hold me close to you, I bless you and you bless me too. When your weary heart is tired, if the world should leave you uninspired, when nothing more of love desired, my blessing goes with you. When the storms of life are strong, when your